Hi, welcome back. Now let's continue reading on page 14. After Winston had solved the puzzle, Mr. Garvey said, I wanted to talk to you about who the other teammates should be. There are a few sharp kids on my mathletes team. I don't know if you know them. Winston looked surprised. I already chose my teammates, he said. Mr. Garvey looked down at him. His fatherly smile tightened, but did not fade. You did? Don't you suppose we might collaborate on this? Well, I didn't know you were going to be the chaperone. All at once, Mr. Garvey's smile collapsed and vanished. Without it, Mr. Garvey's face took on a chiseled from stone look. He said sharply, I'm not going to be a chaperone, Winston. I'll be a coach, a mentor, a guide. It's not my job to drive you around. It's my job to see that we win. You do understand that, don't you? Winston nodded and tried not to look as sick as he was starting to feel. Yes, sorry. Well, and part of my job is making sure we have the best possible team. Who is that you have chosen to join us? My friends, Mal and Jake. The math teacher took a deep breath. Would I know either of these young men? I don't know. Mal is in the drama club. Jake is on the baseball team. An actor and an athlete, said Mr. Garvey. Well, actually, Mal works backstage. Mr. Garvey nodded and flicked a hand into the air, not caring if Mal worked on stage, backstage, or collected tickets. Now, I'm very sure they're good at what they do, but I don't think there's going to be much call for moving props around or tackling the other team. Winston couldn't believe it. Mr. Garvey wanted to kick Mal and Jake off the team. He tried not to show panic in his voice. They're good puzzle solvers. They both are. Mr. Garvey sighed and stared at Winston thoughtfully. Winston, do you want to win this thing? Well, sure I do. Oh, I believe you, I really do. He shrugged, and his smile turned doubtful. You also, I imagine, want to hang out with your friends and have a good time together, don't you? Yeah, I guess so. Well, that's my point. You have the whole summer to have fun with your friends. I think it would be better if you considered Friday's adventure to be an important job you've been asked to do, that we have been asked to do. You and I. A job? Mowing the lawn is a job. This was a spectacular event that he could hardly wait to begin. Still, he understood what Mr. Garvey was getting at and said, We're going to take it very seriously. We're not going to goof around, I promise. We all want to win. Mr. Garvey nodded, that doubtful expression lingering on his face. Sure. You say your friends are good puzzle solvers? Well, maybe that's so. But I teach advanced math classes here, as well as running the math club. We have some very bright students who I think it might be better fitting for something like this. I already told my friends they could come along. Oh, yes, that's regrettable. I tried to contact you quickly so that we might work together to build the best possible team. You work fast. But Principal Unger said I could choose whoever I wanted, Winston said. Mr. Garvey's eyes flared. Well, maybe he got a little caught up in the excitement of the moment. Perhaps he forgot to consider what was best for the school. Winston shook his head. I can't just tell them they're not invited. No, I wouldn't make you do that, Mr. Garvey said with sympathy. You can leave that to me. I'll tell them it was a misunderstanding and you didn't have the authority to invite them in the first place. Now, they'll get over it, I promise. I'll have the main office page them right after class. Now, what did you say their names were again? Winston was frozen. All he could do was blink stupidly at the math teacher. The simple act of saying his friends' names felt like a betrayal. How had things fallen apart so quickly? Who would replace Jake and Mal? The advanced math kids were older. Winston hardly knew them. He'd be solving with strangers instead of with his best friends. In no time flat, Mr. Garvey had ripped all the fun out of a one-of-a-kind experience. Mr. Garvey said, Winston! Hello? Not really thinking about what he was about to do, Winston said slowly, "That's all right. I'll tell them. You're forming your own team." Mr. Garvey looked surprised. "Are you sure? I know they're your friends, and I don't mind breaking the news to them. If they're going to be angry at someone, let them be angry at me." "No, I'll do that. I'll tell them that all three of us have been replaced." "What?" Now it was Mr. Garvey's turn to blink. "Oh, no, you're still on the team, Winston." "No, I don't want to do it without my friends." Which, well, wasn't exactly true. He wanted to do it very much, and he could hardly believe the words were coming out of his mouth. But in some way that he couldn't explain, not going was more important than going without Jake and Mal. He'd read about it after, or call the company and see if he could get the puzzles when the event was done. It wouldn't be the same thing, but he couldn't invite his friends and then just as quickly cut them out. They would understand, and they probably wouldn't hold it against Winston, but they would also remember. Mr. Garvey, frowning, stared at Winston, said, "I thought solving puzzles was your favorite thing to do." "It is." "You're going to pass up a day full of puzzle solving simply because your friends can't come along? That seems a little foolish to me, Winston, if you don't mind me saying." "Yeah, I guess so." Winston shrugged and he gazed off down the hallway. He couldn't look at Mr. Garvey. "I think I'll feel bad all day long," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I told them they could come, and then if they're not there, I just don't think it would be fun at all." "Oh, well, maybe it wouldn't be fun. Maybe it would be hard work. But at the end of the day, you'll bring home a large financial reward to your school. Now, doesn't that make up for some of it? Why don't you think of it that way? Isn't it worth money for your school?" Winston said nothing. He was afraid Mr. Garvey would talk him out of quitting. Part of him was hoping it would happen. Mr. Garvey continued, "I think you have a responsibility, Winston, to attend this event and do your best, no matter who your teammates are." A new small realization poked its way through Winston's anger and disappointment. In fact, it felt a little bit like solving a puzzle. He'd picked up on the clues that were right there in front of him and understood how they fit neatly together. Mr. Garvey had an entire class of smart kids to draw from, yet he was trying quite hard to convince Winston to stay on the team. Quite hard. "This is an opportunity for you, Winston, to give something back to your school. Do you understand?" "You really want me to be on the team?" Mr. Garvey gave a small bark of laughter. "That's what I've been trying to tell you." "Well, you don't think that you could win without me?" Mr. Garvey looked surprised and then turned stony again. "I wouldn't go that far. I teach a lot of bright students. Some of them like puzzles very much." "Well, this will be more than solving math puzzles, though. It'll probably be all kinds of puzzles." Mr. Garvey nodded slowly, aware he was being backed up against a cliff. "You're probably right. That's why I think it would be best if you stayed on the team." Mentally crossing his fingers, Winston said, "Well, I'll stay on the team if my friends can stay on the team." The math teacher crossed his arms. "And if not?" Winston shrugged again. The stony look on Mr. Garvey's face intensified. He shook his head in disbelief. "You're playing hardball with me, aren't you, Winston?" "Well, no," Winston said, although he knew the real answer was yes. "I'm just saying that we already have a good team. That's the team I want to be on." The teacher gaped down at him for several moments. He blew out a long breath and said, "Look at this from my point of view. Who are these friends of yours? They aren't elite students, or I would have heard of them. One of them may be a fine athlete, but athletes don't tend to be master puzzle solvers." He searched around for some new way to salvage the situation and settled on, "Did I mention to you how much I want to win this thing?" "You know, they're really both good thinkers," said Winston. "We're a good team. You'll see." Mr. Garvey thought about it, shook his head briefly, threw his arms out wide in a gesture of surrender. Guess I will. You win, Mr. Breen. Winston was hugely relieved. Thank you. He almost extended an arm to shake Mr. Garvey's hand in gratitude, but stopped himself from doing that. It'll be fine. I promise. Mr. Garvey nodded, not wanting to discuss it any further. Winston was happy, but Mr. Garvey clearly was not. The teacher dug through the leather bag he was carrying and brought out a piece of paper and a pen. Give me your address. I'll pick up all three of you at your house at 8:30 Friday morning. Winston wrote his address and handed it back to the math teacher. Mr. Garvey glanced at it and said, Okay, I'll see you in a couple days. Be ready. And he stalked off down the hallway in a rush. He definitely didn't look happy. Let me see how much is left in this chapter. We'll keep going. Ah! Yelled the knight as the blade of the sword separated his head from his body. The headless knight fell to his knees and turned to dust. Then the dust itself vanished. When things died in this video game, they died permanently. Oh, you did it again, said Jake, frustrated. How did you do it? Well, when you just stand there gaping, you made it real easy, said Mel. I don't just stand there. Yeah, you do. All the time. I can tell when you're trying to push the buttons for a special move. You take your eyes off the game, look at your controller, and your knight stands there like he's bird watching or something. Jake stood up, aggravated. This joystick has more buttons than an airplane cockpit. Who could keep track of them all? Yeah, said Mel. He turned to Winston, who was on the couch waiting for his turn. Winston, you're up. Your turn to take on the master. And he blew on his knuckles like his hands were registered weapons. They had been addicted to the game 10,000 Swords for a few weeks, and even though it was Winston who owned the game, Mal had become the undisputed champion. Winston was passable. Jake, considering his dexterity on the baseball field, was surprisingly hopeless. He once impaled himself on his own sword before his opponent could get a swing at him. They couldn't figure out how Jake had done it. They'd spent half an hour trying to do it again, with no success. Jake moved on the sofa and Winston picked up the controller. Mal pushed start, and the two warriors prepared to duel in a bleak castle dungeon. As the swords playing together, Jake said, So is there anything we have to do to get ready for this contest? Winston said, focused on the game. I can't think of anything. I wish there was, because I hate waiting. Mal's knight jumped around, baiting Winston into making a move. And he said, And we're stuck with Mr. Garvey as our chaperone? Can't we get anybody else? I mean it. Anybody else on the planet. I wish, said Winston. Mr. Unger chose him, so that means he's the guy. There aren't many teachers willing to give up their first day of summer vacation. You know, I never thought of it as their summer vacation, said Jake. Me either, said Mal. His fighter lunged forward. The phone rang. Katie, get the phone! Winston yelled up to his sister while his fighter ran away from his opponent. The phone rang again. Katie! Do you want me to get it? Said Jake. Yeah. Mal's fighter smacked him a good one. Jake picked up the receiver. Hello? No, he's in a sword fight right now. Who is this? Who? Winston glanced over and saw the confusion on Jake's face. That was all the opening Mal needed, and a moment later, Winston's knight was a pile of dust dissolving on the castle floor. Oh, nuts, said Winston. That's not fair, I got distracted. And that's why your character is dead, Mal pointed out. Jake waved the phone and said, He won't say who it is. What do you mean? And he took the phone and said, Hello. Winston Breen? It was a deep male voice. Yeah? Did you break the code? And this was said in what Winston guessed was supposed to be an ominous, mysterious tone. It didn't quite get there, and now that the voice had said more than 2 words, Winston thought it might be a kid, lowering his own voice to sound older. Who is this? Winston asked. His question was ignored. Did you break the code? Whoever it was asked again in the slow, deep voice that summoned a demon in a horror movie, except this voice cracked a little at the final word. Well, he must be talking about the principal's code, the one that got them into the puzzle event. What else could he mean? So Winston said, Yeah, I did. Well, then I'll be seeing you, said the voice, dropping to a dramatic whisper. There was a click as the mystery caller hung up. What was that? Winston, baffled, slowly hung up and stared at the phone as if another bizarre call might come through at any second. Mal and Jake were looking at him. So who was it? Mal asked. I don't know. He didn't say. Well, what did he want? He wanted to know if I cracked the code, and he wanted to tell me that he'd be seeing me. I thought about that. Oh, that's creepy, said Jake. Do you know who it was? I told you he didn't tell me his name. Yeah, but you're the Mr. Puzzle solver, Winston, so I thought maybe you'd figured it out anyway. Winston shook his head. I have no idea. Mal flopped back to the floor, picked up the video game joystick. Ah, well, crank call. If he'll be seeing you, I guess we'll know soon enough. Who wants to play? Jake, you're up. That's the end of chapter 2.